Almajestar Astroea Unica Bico Masques is a new addition to the Dark States Unica strategy. It's a mask variation, which means that we have access to early game persona riding, we have access to other skills that we can take advantage of on a persona ride turn, as well as Bico Masques' new skill. This deck is still a setup deck that requires you to get the 3 critical triggers into the soul as soon as possible to unlock your Unica's power at full capacity as soon as you can to take full advantage of Bico Masques. However, I do think that it is one of those decks that is an awkward spot because of its playstyle and just how people treat Unica Masques. Now, I'll discuss my feelings about her later on in this video before we move on over to camera 2, but I need you guys to do something for me first. I need you guys to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell. It does hurt that a lot of you guys that watch my videos are not subscribed to my channel, but there's plenty of stuff coming out for the Prime Vanguard channel and with the What If series and everything else that I got going on to surprise you with. So go ahead and hit that notification bell and get subscribed so you guys stay tuned for all the action to come out. With that being said, Cardfighters, let's go ahead and get this deck profile started. Alright you guys, to showcase the ride line, I'm still playing the Almajestar base ride line. There's no ride line that does efficient job as this one does to make Unica work. Sparta giving you the extra soul charge and card draw is very welcome, and then Dinah being a reliable piece that we're going to call out with Sparta onto the rear guard when you go into Unica right now is very important. As you know, with the current meta with Gondiva, Ava, and Chronojet running around, being able to maintain our rear guards is super imperative for this deck, as that's how you can take full advantage of Unica. And thanks to Dinah still being in the deck, it is a piece that can recycle our triggers that are in our drop zone back into the soul. That is a rear guard that we can reliably use throughout our time period during the game to take advantage of Unica's full power. For my first grade 3, I am playing the new star of the show, which is the Bico Masques Unica. Now, I'm very well aware that Bico Masques Unica has a lot of mixed feelings, but for me personally, I think that Bico Masques Unica, with her ability to get additional drive, retire a rear guard, and then give you a restanding attack based off the number of critical triggers you have bound, this card is designed to be a finisher, and I think that's where a lot of people get confused at. The way I've approached Bico Masques Unica is using this card as a finisher, and what do I mean by that? What I mean is that it's sometimes imperative to sit on old Unica and persona ride into that, or wait till your persona ride turn with Unica and then go into this card. If you can max out or turbo Unica's ability early and then start getting that early points of damage and your opponent's just not healing, by the time they're at 3 or 4 damage, when you drop this card, those 4 attacks and the number of cards you have bound in to the bind zone with her ability makes her just a lot better. I think that Unica as a grade 3 herself, the OG one, is very strong. You're getting everything that this card wants to do, but without as much resources or as much hassle. So for that particular reason, using this card as a finisher to get the 4th attack in at a high power just makes it a lot better. For my next grade 3, I'm still playing 3 copies of Almajestar Astroea Unica. Now, as I've stated about Bico Masques, I do think it's important to approach this card as a finisher and use Unica until you reach the threshold needed to take advantage of this card at its full power. Staying on this card to get the crit, the drive, as well as retiring one of your opponent's rear guards and power to your own rear guards means that you can really sit on this card and just set up with it to beat down your opponent. And then finally, when you go into this, that 4th attack becomes a lot scarier because they don't have the resources to defend against it if they would have they stayed on Unica. While she is only locked into 3 attacks, everything that she does as a Vanguard is very powerful, and to your rear guards is very helpful as well, which means that beating down with this card makes it a lot better. And then finally you go into this, you can go into this, get that 4th attack with the additional 10,000 power to really hurt your opponent in the later game. This might not be the most normal strategy that people might use with Unica Masques, but I personally like this style of play. I like staying on old Unica and getting the guaranteed crit, getting the guaranteed +1 drive, and just pushing my opponent really hard on that turn so that when I finally go into this, I know that that 4th attack is going to be devastating. For my final grade 3, I'm playing 2 copies of Mask of Hydragam. This is a mask deck, this is required. Now my grade 2 lineup is still an experiment, but I'm still sticking with 2 copies of Buricon Manticore. Buricon Manticore is a solid beatdown piece for the deck, being able to get 10,000 power and then go up in power with your Unica Mask or your regular Unica's effect to make it a stronger rear guard, means that you have a card that easily hits a magic threshold against your opponent. So it makes, you know, that beatdown turn or that Unica turn where you've maxed out on all the critical triggers in the soul just a lot better. And on top of the fact that you are playing against a meta right now that is going to blow up a lot of rear guards that become really strong on their own, have very powerful effects individually, are super important right now, and Bureaucon Manticore just fits the bill. I will say that this is one of the most flexible slots in the deck. It can be the new grade 2 that counts as discard fodder. It can be turned into one of the other grade 2s I'm going to showcase for the deck. But right now, I really am enjoying this card's presence in the deck because it's great on every Unica turn, whether it be the old Unica or the masked Unica. For my next grade 2, I am playing 2 copies of Clean Sweep Dragon. Now, Clean Sweep Dragon, I actually feel like is a staple for Unica, simply for the fact that Unica is a deck that does not build up the largest amount of hand, and because of the meta that we're in with decks, again, like Ava and Gondiva, and I know I keep saying their names, but those are the decks like I've really been playing against a lot and been practicing against a lot. This card being able to clear out those Obscuriads, or even clear out Gondiva's board because the player just isn't expecting Unica to have any form of control but outside of her effect, means that taking away their rear guards and slowing their formation down and making them overcommit pieces, or them losing out on the Obscuriads, or them Gondiva losing out on its rear guards that they haven't used yet, means that your Clean Sweep Dragon also does the same thing as your Bureaucon Manticore of reaching a 25,000 power threshold while also clearing out the board, which will slow them down, meaning you can use less cards to block with Unica or force more cards out of their hands. So when you finally go into Unica Mask, again, that 4th attack becomes a lot scarier than it would have been if you went in early. I do think that this card is a staple for Unica. It's a very cheap card that clears out the board and acquires a mass amount of power. And if you keep losing your rear guards to your other opponent's effects, cards like this that can generate a mass amount of power and then do all of this just become better in the long run. For my next grade 2, I'm playing 3 copies of Dragon Tree Wretch Skull Kemda. This is a mask deck, so I do think it is imperative to play these mask searchers, being able to filter out your deck for the grade 3 Mask of Hydragam, and then obviously use that card to filter out your deck for the grade 3 mask, means that we can essentially take out 2 cards from our deck later in the game, potentially, but giving the Dragon Tree marker and it just being a piece we can use in the early game to rush with also makes it pretty solid as well. We don't use a lot of counterblast in the deck with our card effects, as well as soul, because we have all these abilities get our soul back. For my last grade 2, I'm playing 4 copies of Kit's Peak Griffin. Now, Kit's Peak Griffin is without a doubt a 4-of staple in this deck. I don't understand Unica players that play this at like 2 or 3. It's a 4-card staple for this deck because it's an on-call unit that gives you automatic access to 2 triggers that you have in the drop zone. And the most important thing about this card is the fact that it becomes a 15k attacker and then a 10,000 point shield. That's very important because, again, Unica is a deck that does not build up a massive hand. You'll end like on a 5 to 6 card hand every single turn because of the extra drive check from Unica, or if you hit a draw trigger, you might get more cards to your hand. But a unit that can become a 10,000 point shield and a 15k attacker that helps you recycle triggers in this deck, especially with the card I'm going to showcase next, means that it's a piece that will always be viable to you every single turn, and it's a good target for your Unica's effects, which are the grade 3 original or the other grade 3 to restand. I definitely think if you're playing Unica and you're not playing 4 of this, you're missing out because this card is just reliable in every single scenario that the deck comes in. And then for my grade 1 lineup, so my grade 1 lineup actually has not changed that much. I'm still playing 3 copies of Steam Battler Googan ROM. Now, the reason why I'm playing 3 copies of Googan ROM is for the simple fact that Unica, since I am staying on the old Unica a little bit longer than I would if I was going to straight into the mask, you don't draw a lot of cards. This card gives you the soul as well as the draw power, and because you play cards in Unica naturally that lets you call or get triggers back from your soul into the drop zone, Googan ROM being able to give you that extra card draw to dig your deck for those extra pieces becomes very important. You're able to filter your deck out for soul charging to get the critical triggers in, you're able to draw extra cards, and I feel like right now against the current meta, you definitely want to be able to create a formation of at least a column and then 1 card here to make it work. And Googan ROM being a body that can get you another body by just drawing that card out and then staying on Unica has been really imperative to the deck. I will talk about Twin Marvel Dragon after I discuss my next card, but I think that if you don't like Googan ROM in this deck, you can switch to Twin Marvel Dragon. There's no difference other than the fact that you're not going to get the card draw from Twin Marvel Dragon. You potentially might get the hit of a trigger, but I actually do value the card draw that this card offers us. For my next grade 1, I'm still playing 3 copies of Capricornus. I think that this card is a staple for Unica. Despite all of the builds that I've seen that have taken this card out or have reduced it to play something else like Zaragon or that new order that lets you counterblast 1, soul blast 3 to put different cards in the soul to use for abilities, Capricornus has defined itself as a staple in this deck. You can drop it onto the early game to start putting triggers out from your hand and dig for other pieces, or just put the triggers that you've been discarding to right up into your grade 1, 2, and 3, and then move those into the soul, so when you finally go into Unica, you can set up for her effect. I don't think you need any more than 3. I think that 3 is perfectly fine. You have ways of getting this card back. For my next card, I'm playing 4 of the Dark States PG. I have Elementaria in my other deck, so just imagine one of these is Elementaria when I switch it out. For my trigger lineup with this deck, it's very simple. You want to be playing 8 crit with this deck. You have to, so that you can take full advantage of Unica's ability. The Dark States OT, because staying on a crit guaranteed is insane. And then you have 3 draw triggers because you want to draw into your pieces later in the game. And I actually think that the trigger lineup for this deck with heals, you can do a 2-2 split with this heal and then replace this with the heal trigger that lets you get 10,000 shield in the early game, and then replace this with the heal trigger that lets you get 10,000 shield when your opponent has a crit. Because Unica is a setup deck, so therefore being rushed does not feel good, and that extra 10,000 shield will definitely help you when you're getting hit with multiple attacks, or you're getting hit with big rearguard attacks in the early game from Ava using its ability to call a card out by the order effect, or other card effects that can just get high powered in the early game. That is the conclusion of my Astroea Unica Masques deck. Now, I know that my build is not anything super unique and isn't very different than what we currently have out there, but I think that with my approach to Unica Masques, that's where I differ from. A lot of the cards in my approach to this deck is taking advantage of using her ability in the early game as soon as possible, and then using cards to maintain resources so that when we finally go into Bico Masques, we can use her as a finisher to go in for the win. But tell me your thoughts about Unica Masques, and maybe tell me what you guys have for your deck builds. I know that there's still a lot of Dark States cards that I get to try and I can still use for this deck. It's one of those nations that I have a lot of cards for it, but I'm still figuring it out. But this is the build that I'm actually very happy with. I definitely see Unica Masques getting a lot of room to grow, especially with Season 3 that I'll be reacting to very soon for Overdress coming out, and we'll see what sort of support she gets in the future. With that being said, card fighters, I'm going to go ahead and head out, and y'all enjoy the rest of your day.